On behalf of MyTAC, I want to welcome Dr. Samantha Russak from Director of Education at Southwick Zoo in Mendon, Mass. And Samantha will talk about some of the amazing animals that are at Southwick Zoo today, and talk about over the 850 animals that are there, what it's like to be in the zoo and daily life of a zookeeper, and all kinds of beautiful things about the animals in the zoo. So Samantha, we can take us to the zoo.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm so happy to be a part of this. I love talking about animals. You'll see that very shortly. So welcome to everyone that's tuning in. So the presentation today is sort of set up into kind of three main sections. So the first is I'll start by giving you a little bit of my background. I don't really like talking about myself. I prefer to talk about the animals, but usually when I start talking about what I do, people are very interested in how I got here. And I will say it's not the most traditional pathway for a zookeeper, but it's been a very interesting one. So that'll be the first part, and then I'll talk a little bit more about Southwick Zoo itself and the history of the zoo and all the good fun stuff that goes into running a zoo. And then lastly, we'll end with what the zookeepers do, what they do for their job, how they got there, and of course, all the animals, because that's the big fun part, what everyone's interested in. So I have plenty of animal videos and photos for you guys to look at. And we'll kind of stop in between each of the sections for some questions, and then hopefully we'll have some time at the end for any additional questions as well. Last thing I'll say before I get started is you might notice on the screen that it says Earth Limited. So just a quick explanation that most people are familiar with the zoo here in Mendon. Earth Limited is our nonprofit that's situated here at the zoo. So Earth Limited is responsible for all of the education programs and the conservation related programs. So as Director of Education, I do a lot of work for both, but technically I'm employed by the zoo. So with that, we'll get started with the background of me. So some cute pictures of when I was little. This to say that I've always been interested in animals since I was very little. So I knew probably from when I was about 2 that I wanted to work with animals. It's definitely my parents' fault that I'm working with animals because they took us to zoos all the time when we were little. My mom was a science teacher, so we caught caterpillars and saw them change into butterflies and caught earthworms and did frog dissections in our backyard and things like that. So it's definitely their fault in a good way though. And you can see, even as a toddler, I was very attracted to animals and fascinated by them. So jumping really far forward from that to my undergrad years, I did my undergraduate work at Miami University in Ohio. And I went there because they had a zoology program, and not very many universities had a zoology, meaning study of animal behavior. A lot of places had biology, but nothing really animal focused. I kind of found out later that was just a carryover that they're an older university. And so their zoology major is pretty much just a bio major, a lot of pre-med. But it ended up working out. A couple of the pictures there, there was a nature center nearby that I volunteered at. That's the picture with the red-tailed hawk on the top left there. So got to start some of my exotic animal experience there. The cats are at a shelter that I volunteered at. So again, always had animals in my life. And then I really started doing some research in undergrad and getting more into the animal behavior side of things. So the bottom left is a poster I presented on a study I did at the Lincoln Park Zoo for a summer, just observing different primate groups they had there. And on the right is from Nicaragua, so my first field school experience, my first fieldwork experience. And I really fell in love with primates, so monkeys and apes, out of all the animals. I just found them fascinating because they're so much like us, but different in so many ways as well. And so I kind of decided to really focus in on that. And so when I went to graduate school, I went to Arizona State University for both my master's and PhD. I really wanted to keep working with primates and looking at their behavior. I got really into chimpanzee behavior specifically. My undergraduate advisor studied chimpanzee tool use in the wild. So I found it fascinating, but I didn't really have a lot of field experience, and you got to make sure that you can cut it out in the field. So one of my next experiences was actually in Costa Rica, and that's where these pictures are from, and I was there working on somebody else's project as a field assistant. And good days were when we saw the animals. Bad days, or not as good days, were like the picture in the middle where I dropped my entire clipboard into the nice mud that was there. Thankfully, because we were in the rainforest, we were using rainproof or waterproof paper, so you kind of prepare for it. But that was a fantastic experience, and made me understand that, yep, this was what I wanted to do, and I could handle field work and live out in the jungle or the forest, no problems. So I continued with my PhD dissertation. And for my dissertation, I ended up spending a year in Tanzania, and I was studying chimpanzee ecology. So the focus was on the chimpanzees, but I was also interested in their competitors, so other animals that use their same habitat and space. So that top picture there is of the Isa Valley, which is in kind of central Tanzania. So you can see it's a very dry area with a river running through the middle where all those green trees are. So a little bit of what you think of as tropical rainforest, but a lot of dry woodland. And I picked that area specifically because it was so dry. Most people think that chimpanzees live in the middle of these very dense rainforests, and that's not true. We have a lot of communities that live in these open areas. So I was interested in if they differed from the groups that did live in the rainforest. One of the really interesting things for me was because it's a woodland area, they undergo natural fire cycles. So the bottom picture there is of a wildfire coming through. This was a small one, but you can see the burned area after the fire came through on the right part of the picture, and the dry grass that's still there being burned on the left-hand side. So that was a new experience for me. Thankfully, I had some wonderful field assistants that were all native Tanzanians to help me get through that and teach me all about their native area and help me find the chimps and do my research. And it was a wonderful time. But just to give you a little bit more idea of how I spent my year there. So it was remote. We had some solar panels for electricity, but not electricity in the way we think of it here. No running water, so we had a nice river nearby that we used for laundry and showers. The top is my tent, so that was my tent for the year. I got a big 6-person tent, even though it was just me, so I could have almost all of my stuff in there. The bottom picture is our pantry area, so no refrigeration. We had to go into town once a month and buy supplies. So we had lots of rice, lots of beans, things that can stay without refrigeration that are fairly cheap. And then the right was our kitchen area. So thankfully we had a cook that worked for our project. I'm a terrible cook with all of the modern amenities we have. I make a lot of things in the microwave, I'm a little ashamed to say. So I wouldn't have survived my year, I don't think, without the wonderful cooking of our cook there at camp. He was wonderful. Made bread from scratch. So that was at least a little different from all the beans and rice we had all the time. And we would get fresh fruits and vegetables. We would have them for about a week or two right after we went shopping in town. And then the rest of the month, we just had to wait and use our other dry supplies. So looking for chimps, because it was in, these are wild chimpanzees. They're not used to people. So most of the time I was looking for what were called signs. So not the actual chimps themselves, but signs they were there. So chimpanzees actually make nests every night, which is pretty cool. So that's that top left picture. So that's a really good indication that they've been in the area, is looking for these nests. The right-hand picture is a knuckle print. So for those of you that don't know, chimpanzees kind of walk on their knuckles folded over because their arms are so big. So that is a clear-cut sign that chimps were in that area. And then the bottom left is from a camera trap. So I was lucky enough to collaborate with another project coming out of Germany. that were monitoring different chimpanzee communities. And they very nicely gave me 24 camera traps that I was able to use while I was there, placed around the Isa Valley. That was also a trek to try and check those cameras and download the data every week or so. But you got really cool photos like the chimps there. So I knew they were there and I was getting some really good information. We did see the chimps themselves as well, but from a distance. So so it's a little bit of a sneaky picture of that chimp because that's actually at a slightly different site where they're more habituated to people and you can get a little closer, not where I was doing my dissertation. But the bottom picture is of a puff adder. So we definitely had lots of other wildlife there, some not so friendly wildlife that we had to watch out for, but just as fascinating. And the right picture is kind of a sad picture, but those are all snares that I had collected. That picture was from over just the course of 2 weeks. So we were fairly close to a refugee village, Burundi refugees coming over the border from political conflict. And they would come into the area, even though it was considered a protected area. There were no rangers or anything like that to guard it. So they would come in and set snares. They weren't necessarily hunting the chimpanzees. They were hunting smaller animals like the bushbuck and deer-like animals. But the chimps would occasionally get caught in the snares. And so if we were out and we saw one, we would cut them down. We did try and go to the village a few times and, chat with the people there and try and see how we can help them with their needs, but also educate them as to why the poaching was bad. And so it was a really eye-opening experience because, it's easy for us to sit back here on the other side of the world in our comfy air-conditioned offices and homes and say, poaching is bad, hunting is bad, but they're really doing it to feed their families. And so coming up with ways to work with those communities and provide them alternatives and really understand the conservation issues and the poaching issues going on is really the way to go about it. And it was really eye-opening to be part of that. So that wasn't the main focus of my project by any means. It sort of just happened while I was there, but I'm very grateful that I had the opportunity to be part of that. So when I came back from Tanzania, those of you who have gone through the process or know people who have their PhDs know that it's a somewhat excruciating process to write your dissertation, or it can be. I had lots of data to go through and lots of writing to do. So I actually started volunteering at a zoo nearby as a way to de-stress. So I wanted to be around the animals and do more hands-on things. And it really solidified that as much as I loved doing the research, that I really liked being hands-on. And so I started to get more involved with the zoo and stayed there for a few years, even after I defended and graduated. So I started off working with mostly birds and primates, and then you can see some other animals there, like the cheetah as well. And then while I was there, I started doing some media work for them too. So we would take some of our animals to the local news stations. The top left picture is me and Jack Hanna. So he came down to Tucson, and so we brought some of our animals down to help him do a show. So really, really cool experiences. And like I said, really solidified my passion for working with animals. But that was in Arizona. I grew up in New Jersey, here on the East Coast. My family's all here, so I wanted to come back here. So I looked for a job and ended up at Southwick Zoo. So they didn't have any keeper positions, but I spoke with Betsy Brewer, who is one of the family members that owns the zoo, and she's the founder of our nonprofit, Earth Limited. And after talking to her, she decided to create this director of education position for me, which is really cool. So I oversee our education department, but I do a lot of outreach work. I still do some media work representing the zoo and Earth, which is really fun. So the left picture there is me with my buddy Paz Blue and Gold Macaw on one of our Zoomobiles. So our Zoomobile is an outreach program where we go to schools and libraries with some of our animals and get to talk to kids. The top right picture was a conservation project we actually participate in, where we released some of our swans in Iowa. as part of a reintroduction program there to increase populations of trumpeter swans. So that was really cool to participate in. We didn't get to go this past year because of COVID, but we did send swans. So our swans are there and got released. We just weren't there with them this year. And the bottom right is just a little TV promo that we did, and that's Truffles, our tamandua or lesser anteater. So a lot of fun, and probably the biggest part of my job now is education. So I still get to be around the animals, but it's very much more focused on the education and outreach side of things, which is great. I get to do stuff like this and talk to you all about what I do. So you can see most of these pictures have kids in them. And I think that's one of the most important and crucial parts of my job is connecting with those younger generations, because they really are our future. It's not just a cliched statement. They really are our future, and getting them interested and passionate about animals and wildlife and conservation and all these issues. So it's really quite a fun job. I do also do some pre-recorded videos that we put out either on our website or especially lately with all the COVID where we were closed for a while. So this next slide is actually a video that I did about our chimpanzees. So I'm going to play that. I'm going to stay quiet. You'll hear me talk and see me in the video talk about the chimpanzees and hopefully learn a little something, but I'm going to let that play. So here we go.
I'm here at the far side of our chimpanzee enclosure, and we have 4 individuals in our troop of chimpanzees right now. So we have our adult male Terry, our adult female Tabitha, their daughter Tansy, and then another adult female Jingles. And Jingles is quite extraordinary actually because she just turned 50 years old. Now on average, chimpanzees only live about 45 years, so she is already beyond that average life expectancy, but she's doing very well here and is very well cared for at Southwick Zoo. The chimpanzees are only one of the many primates that we have here at Southwick Zoo. Primates are animals like lemurs, monkeys, and apes. We know that chimpanzees are a type of ape because they don't have any tails. Now, you might think this might make it hard for them to move around, but they are quite adept at both walking on the ground and climbing around in the trees. They are what we call arboreal, which means they spend most of their time up in the trees. When they do come down to the ground, they do something called knuckle walking, and this is because their arms are slightly longer than their legs, so they have to fold under their knuckles so that they can walk properly on the ground. So chimpanzees, just like most other primates, are very, very intelligent, and that means we have to give them a lot of enrichment to keep them happy and healthy here at Southwick Zoo. So things for them to climb on, puzzles and toys for them to play with, mirrors to look into, all of those different sorts of items count as enrichment for them to keep them nice and busy and keep them from being bored here at the zoo. So if you're at the zoo and looking at all of our different enclosures, you might see things like balls or toys or climbing structures, hammocks, things like that, which help keep our animals happy and healthy.
All right, so so that's just an example of a clip that we would record. Now, obviously, my background, I did study chimps. I don't get to work with the chimps here at the zoo beyond doing these educational videos. That is the job of our primate keepers. What is kind of ironically funny is that one of the chimps, the youngest one, doesn't really like me for whatever reason because I don't work with her. But she's decided that usually when she sees me that she will throw things at me. So it's something we've talked to the keepers about. We're trying to come up with a plan of how maybe to get around that behavior. She does it to other people as well. It's not just me, but it's a little bit, I think, the most ironic with me because I did study chimpanzees. So this next clip is just a little highlight of one of those, an outtake, I guess you could say, of this talk. So I'll let that play.
So if you watch our chimpanzees move around their enclosure...
Oops, she's throwing a rock at you.
Oh my...
All right, so that was a quick, just a quick outtake. She does that quite often, unfortunately. She does it with some visitors as well, which is why, we don't want to encourage that behavior. She is about 10 years old, which is kind of a juvenile age. So a lot of it is just attention getting and something hopefully that she'll grow out of. But working with animals is always very exciting. But that's kind of the end of the first section here about me. So before I move on to the history of the zoo and operating the zoo, wanted to stop for a minute or two and see if there were any questions.
We haven't seen any questions in chat yet, but we'll keep you updated if any come in.
Perfect. I didn't want to click on the chat button because yesterday when I tried to click on mute or any of the menu items, it kicked me out of the presentation. So
yeah, that can mess things up pretty quickly for sure.
Awesome. All right, I'll keep going then. Obviously, if questions come to mind, we'll have more time to answer them later. All right, so moving on to the next part is more about the history of the zoo. So Southwick Zoo, the property here, it's about 300 acres that the family owns, and the zoo sits on about 200 of those acres. So we are considered the largest zoo in New England. It's a very spacious property. This land dates back to the 1800s, though it's been in the family for quite a while. It was originally a dairy farm. And Justin Southwick was really interested in animals, particularly migratory waterfowl, so types of birds, and started becoming an expert in collecting them. And then he eventually started showing off his collection, and friends encouraged him to put out a donation box to make a little money off of that and support himself and those animals and the animal care. And with those donations, he was able to start kind of branching out from just birds and have some other exotic animals. And so Southwick was originally called Southwick Wild Animal Farm. And it was incorporated as an official zoo in 1965. So the zoo itself has been here for 55 years, but the history goes back well beyond that. I had to include a picture of the red bat there. For those of you who've been to Southwick Zoo before, you might know what that is. It's a little bit of an inside joke. So I don't want to really give it away, but I will say that that red bat has been here since 1965, so the entire time the zoo has been open. And if you haven't been here and don't know what that is about, I definitely need to come and check it out. Or send me a message. I don't want to give it away in the presentation about what is going on with the red bat there. But it's definitely something Southwick Zoo is known for. Things have greatly changed over the past 55 years at Southwick's, but in the zoo field in general. In terms of Southwick Zoo now, we're no longer called a wild animal farm, we're a zoo. And that's just to kind of reflect that we do much more than just have animals here. And it's run by the Southwick Brewer family. So that picture that you see there, so Justine is in the pink shirt in the front, Justine Brewer Southwick, or sorry, Southwick Brewer. So her father was Justin Southwick, who owned and ran the zoo originally. So the Brewer family has been running the zoo since the 80s. And there's 2 sisters and 3 brothers that run the zoo. They all have a part to play. Whether it's managing the food and beverage side of things, or the finances, or the landscaping. Dr. Peter Brewer is our head veterinarian and also the zoo director. So they're very much involved. Whoops, sorry about that. Very much involved here. And we are, as I mentioned, the largest zoo in New England. So we currently have over 850 animals that represent over 150 different species, so quite a variety here. And there's just a lot of work that goes into the zoo. So just to give you a little bit of an idea, we put together this slide for a fundraiser that we recently had while we were closed, because people were asking, but it's really interesting to break down the numbers. So this is an average monthly cost for us. So you'll see things like the hay, produce, grain, and meat. That's obviously all animal food. And then we have other expenses, including vet care, transportation costs, things like replacing light fixtures, or buying enrichment, things like that. I'll go into that. And then the usual costs that go into running any business, so heating, electricity, insurances. So just for an average month, you can see that that's $140,000. So if you times that by 12 for the year, it's 1 million, close to $1,700,000 a year. And that's just in basic expenses. That's, not accounting for any new upgrades or new exhibits or any, catastrophic changes that need to occur or any, expenses we weren't accounting for. So it's very, very costly to run the zoo. And we are privately owned, so we don't get any federal or state funding. So all of our money comes from admissions and concessions here. So being closed for those 2 months for COVID did hit us pretty hard. We're managing and we did the best we can, and we're being a little creative, which I'll talk about in a couple of slides about how we're managing through these times right now. But a lot of people don't realize, the family likes to say that the zoo is technically a for-profit business, but there's not much profit in it because all of the money that comes in goes right back to taking care of the animals. All right. So some of the other things to consider, of course, exhibits are a big part of the zoo. So these are two of our exhibits here. The top one is for our ruffed lemurs, and the bottom one is a new renovation we actually recently did for our hyena exhibit. So you can see that they look very different. And so when we're doing exhibits, we have to consider the needs of the animals, so their space requirements, their temperature requirements, how they move around. So you'll see a lot of our primate exhibits for the monkeys and apes have a lot of wire on them so that they can really utilize their entire space. They can literally climb up the walls if they want to. Whereas, the hyenas are not going to be climbing. So theirs is a more open exhibit. We did introduce this glass viewing panel area to make it a little more aesthetically pleasing for visitors to see them through glass than through wire fencing. So it's a constant balance between the animal needs and then also our public needs, right? They want to be able to see the animal up close as possible, but we need to make sure that it's safe for the animals and safe for the public as well. So it's really hard, and a lot of work goes into making sure all those needs are met on both sides and balancing that. As I mentioned, the zoo is much more than just animals though. So we have, things like events, we have gift shops, we have food concessions, we have to have a big social media and marketing presence. So all of these things go into running and operating the zoo. And we try and do it the best we can so it looks like it's running seamlessly behind the scenes. And really, all of our public community are here to see the animals and learn about the animals, but all of this other stuff is going on at all times behind the scenes. So there's definitely a lot that goes into running and operating and managing a zoo. And one of the biggest things besides the animals is knowing what our public want. And so I thought I'd just let you guys see this little video here. This is something we recorded, I think 2 years ago, but with our camp kids, but it's a really interesting perspective about what people like to do when they're here. So I'm gonna let this play. And
all right, what's your favorite thing about Southwick Zoo?
Learning about the animals because you can't see them right in your backyard.
How you can feed the giraffes. It's like playing tug of war with a wild animal. Everything.
All of it.
My favorite part is all of it.
It's a really nice place to go, and it's a really nice place to go with your family.
Like a regular zoo, you can see animals, but they also have more fun activities like the maze and more.
I think I would tell them to go on the sky ride first because you can see lots of parts of the zoo with the sky ride.
I would tell them the sky safari by far.
To feed the giraffes because that was really cool.
To maybe visit the giraffes and chimps.
You should go see the birds. They're really beautiful and kind of funny.
I would tell them to go visit the lions and tigers because I think they're really cool.
I think I would tell them to go see the tigers. They're always fun.
I would tell them to see the chimps.
I would probably say go visit the rhinos or maybe the giraffes probably.
The new reptile house because that's pretty cool also.
I would say the reptile room.
And how many times have you guys been to Southwick Zoo?
I've probably been here about like 50 times or so.
I couldn't count.
Give you a good overview of the zoo as well, and you know, kids say it best, and they make up a lot of our audience here at the zoo. So the last part of this, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the changes we've made very recently to deal with the COVID situation that we're in. So as I mentioned, we're a privately owned zoo. We don't get any outside funding. We're also a seasonal zoo. So we are only open normally from April through October. And so we really, really rely on those admissions when we're open to carry us through the entire year. So this year we were delayed in opening by about 2 months with all of the COVID restrictions put in place, which we completely agree with and acknowledge that they needed to be in place for everyone's safety. But so we were looking for ways to kind of recoup our revenue and keep things going. And so one of the things we did was we have this drive-through now. We're doing Wednesdays. So definitely through the month of July, I think we're going to try and keep it through August as well. They've been doing very well, where we open up the zoo after our normal hours, so some evening hours, and we've sectioned off the zoo so you can do a drive-through tour. So it's a different, unique way of seeing the zoo and the animals here. And it's a safer way to see it because you get to stay in the comfort of your own car. So things like that, being very creative. We've had to be creative with our educational presentations as well. You know, we're not visiting schools. Schools were closed. So we've done a lot of virtual visits as best as we can. Being in a large wooded area, our connectivity isn't great. So even for this presentation, you know, the option of walking around the zoo while I was talking is not really a realistic option, but we can do fun things like show all these videos that we have pre-recorded. So it's a lot of zoos are having trouble financially in these times. You know, they can't be open to the public. We're not getting the crowds that we normally do. So we're doing the best we can and trying to be a little creative in how we get people to still support us. And I have to say that the community around here has been really wonderful in supporting the zoo and our animals and staff here. So that's kind of the end of this section. So before we move on to zookeeping and animals, any questions?
Well, while we give our participants some time to think up of questions, I have a question.
Sure.
You mentioned that you put in glass windows for the hyenas so it could be more appealing for the visitors. How did the hyenas feel about that change to their environment?
Yeah, good question. So for them, they didn't really seem to notice much. So they went from a pretty open gauge wire to the glass. So they don't come right up to the glass yet. They're still getting used to that in terms of being that close to the public. Because, you know, before there was an outer barrier fence and then their wire fence in between them and people. But in terms of, you know, seeing the people that are there, that doesn't seem to have changed because they get the same visibility that they had before. But it is taking them a little while to be comfortable enough coming right up to the glass. We're hoping for that soon. Good question, though. All right. Any other questions?
Looks like we don't have any questions just yet, but if anyone brings one up, I'll bring it up after the last section.
Awesome, perfect. All right, so moving right along, we're going to get into a little bit what it's like to be a zookeeper. So everyone always, you know, wants to know what a zookeeper does, what their day looks like. I can say it's not just playing with animals. It's a lot more dirty work than that. But we also did a series of some videos with our keepers. So I figured they can say it a little better than I can about what their day looks like. So I'm going to play a few videos. This first one here is of one of our stock keepers, Jonathan.
My name is Jonathan Smith, and I am a hoofstock/carnivore zookeeper. Typical day starts off with making sure that the cleaning truck has all the tools on it, or the feeding truck has all of the grain, hay that we need for it. Then basically have a routine that we follow every day as far as which exhibits we go to clean. If I'm on the cleaning crew, we go from exhibit to exhibit, cleaning. If I'm on the feeding crew, we go to each pen, make sure that the animals have fresh water, make sure that we give them the appropriate diets that they need, the hay, the grains that they need. It's great coming in early. I love coming in early. It's nice and peaceful, nice and quiet. I come in, check on some of the animals first thing in the morning, make sure that they have fresh water. Some of them have to be locked in first thing in the morning, so it's easy to clean when the cleaning crew comes in. I like interacting with people, so I do actually enjoy seeing people around the zoo. I also just love animals, so I love being around the animals, interacting with the animals. The cues from the animals a lot of time will be their physical motions, the way they act, even something like how they're holding their ears. Noises they might be making will let us know whether or not the animal is uncomfortable with us being there or whether they're comfortable with us being there. Every day we keep a zookeeper journal. We keep a record of any births, any deaths. We keep a record of any animals that are acting a little strange, just so that we can let the person on the next day know that there's something to look out for. So there was an older gentleman came into the Earth building with his grandson. He wanted to see some animals. It was a slower day, so I was able to take out animals for him to touch and interact with. When they were finally leaving, the grandfather came up to me and said, "I just want to thank you for taking animals out for my grandson, because he's autistic, and up until today he has never touched an animal, and today he actually did." And that's probably the best day I've ever had. I would say just that it's an awesome career to have. It's a difficult career that isn't just playing with animals. It's very physically demanding, but it is very rewarding. I love working here. I've been coming here since I was a kid. Always wanted to work as a zookeeper, always wanted to work here, and I'm actually getting to do what I always wanted to do.
Before we get to the next video, I just wanted to throw in this picture. So all the videos you'll see when it was filmed was nice out during our season, but even though we're closed to the public normally over the winter, we're still here, we're still taking care of the animals. So this picture is a little reminder of we have to deal with New England weather too. So snowstorms digging out our vehicles and getting to the animals. They all stay here at the zoo throughout the entire winter. They have indoor areas, of course, where they can be kept nice and warm, but they all are still here, so we have to take care of them. But the next video here is two of our other primate keepers, so I'll let them tell you their story.
Hi, my name is Brittany Brasso, and I am a primate keeper here at Southwick Zoo.
My name is Jess Lanchansky. I am a primate zookeeper 4 days a week and a hoofstock zookeeper 1 day a week.
So as a primate keeper at the zoo, we usually start our day with produce. So we get all the produce ready, we cut up their diets, and it's for all the species of monkeys that we have, and as well as the other animals we take care of. We have lots of tools and things that we need: buckets, rakes, and shovels, hay for the animals. We load up the trucks. With the primates, we actually split up into two groups. One does one side and one does the other. So it depends on what side you're on, what animals you're cleaning, but basically we clean and feed. Our first pen that we do every single day is the kangaroo pen.
On hoofstock, it's basically loading the truck with the tools, going up to, we usually start at the giraffes and just start cleaning the pens.
The thing I most look forward to, I think, is just seeing the animals and interacting with them, seeing how they are every day. And
I usually just look forward to going to see how the animals are behaving on that day. I like to see, even still after being here 15 years, I like to see all the monkeys, you know, they see the truck and they just get so excited. They know the food's coming, they're always so happy.
Different cues we can take from the animals. Sometimes you know if an animal doesn't want to cooperate, if they're you know, giving you bad looks or if they're screaming at you. Or the chimpanzees, for instance, the little one, Tansy, does throw things at us or gets upset inside. And so usually what happens with that is we ignore them and walk away because you don't want to enforce that behavior. We keep certain records and logs throughout the day. We have a normal hay sheet to make sure everybody's kept clean throughout the day. We have a zookeeping log, which we keep everything in, so if there's births or unfortunate deaths or injuries or medicine that anybody takes, we do log all that on, and it gets sent into a system. The best day in my memory that I've had is probably just being hired here. It was a pretty amazing thing to know that this is an actual real job and I was being allowed to do it, so that was very exciting.
My best day, I think, would be when Tansy was born, the baby chimp. It was really cool to see Tabitha carrying her that day and raising her and just watching like a little baby chimp turn into what she is now. People always ask, especially around here, like, do you love your job? And I always say, absolutely. I said, it's totally worth it. You know, it's a lot of work and a lot goes into it, but it's absolutely worth it to have the basic interaction with the different animals and just to see the way they're all totally unique personalities. It's really cool to see that.
All right, and we got one more from one of our education keepers.
My name is Sarah DiCarlo. I am an education coordinator here at the Earth Limited Discovery Center at Southwick Zoo. My day here at the zoo normally starts at the barn where we sign in and everything. We have a couple different animals that are housed there. We crate them, clean their enclosures from overnight, and then we transport them to different areas of the zoo for their outdoor enclosure. Once we've dropped them off and fed them, then we start at the Earth Discovery Center and we have a couple animals that eat throughout the day and start cleaning some of the enclosures and start getting our heads wrapped around what presentations we have that day. We also have interns every day that we need to coordinate where they're going, who they're working with. Towards the end of the day, we start doing our animals crating and being transported back to their indoor enclosures for the evening. Probably the thing that I look forward to the most is being able to give Pickles, the African crested porcupine, a big giant hug. He's my favorite animal here at the zoo. He's a hand-raised African crested porcupine that is, I think he's about 7 years old right now. He's just like a spiky dog. Every day for pretty much all of the animals, we have to clean their enclosures, feed them, give them fresh water. Not all of our animals eat every day because at the Earth Discovery Center we take care of a lot of reptiles and arthropods that in the wild wouldn't normally eat every day. Or some days they might eat protein, some days they might eat vegetables, so the feeding routine changes every day, but at least every day we need to clean them and give them fresh water. In the Earth Discovery Center, because we do a lot of actual interaction and handling of a lot of our animals, we definitely have to read their body language. We don't ever make them do anything that they don't want to do, so some days your day completely changes because all of your plans go out the window because animals tell you through body language and through ways that they're acting that they do not want to do whatever you would like them to do. Every day we have a daily log that has every animal that we take care of listed. In the recent past, the best day that I can remember is when we finished fabricating all of the backgrounds and for the new reptile exhibit. That was definitely a wonderful day when all of the weeks of work and fabricating that we did for all those backgrounds paid off. We were able to see them installed. We were able to put the animals actually in there. That was probably one of the best overall days. One thing that I would want everybody to know is when you see us in enclosures, whether it's our facility or any other facility, just keep in mind that we are not just pooper scoopers. We care about all of these animals deeply. We would not be doing this job if we didn't care about it. We really are dedicated to what we do. All of us would not be in this position if we didn't really love what we were doing. It's easy to feel sad for these animals because it looks like they're behind cages and they are in cages, but these animals are in captivity already. We're giving them the best possible life that we could.
All right, so you get a little bit of an idea of the variety of tasks that we have. I just want one more quick video. This is of our interns. So we rely on a lot of help from college interns over the summer, and it's a great experience for them to get to figure out if they want to be a zookeeper, if it's something that they're interested in, and it gives them some experience. So this highlights their experience here.
Hi, I'm Katie, and I'm in the primate department here at Southwick Zoo. So on a typical day, we start out by cleaning and feeding all the animals. The rest of the day, we kind of just work on projects, constructing enrichment for the animals, and it kind of differs day by day because sometimes animals need more branches, or we need to take things out of their cage, or we do a little bit more feeding. My favorite part is just being around the animals all day, and you get to see their interactions with each other, with their food, with the enrichment you give them, and with us when we go in to feed them and clean them.
So I worked at a zoo last summer and I really enjoyed it, so I wanted to continue that experience, and I knew Southwick had a great reputation. And the bird internship called to me because of the training part, and that was something I had never really done before. My favorite part is definitely the training. It's really rewarding. The birds are incredibly smart and they can do so many things.
I'm an education intern, so I'm part of the summer program here at the zoo. I've always loved zoos. I've been to zoos around the world and the country, and I really love Southwick's. I think it gives you a great experience here with the animals. I've always loved working with kids, and I thought that doing a summer program here at the zoo would be a great opportunity for me to work with kids and animals and in an environment that was really fun. If you like working with kids and animals, this is probably the perfect internship for you.
I decided to apply for an internship at Southwick's because it's one of the few places where students can get hands-on experience with a wide variety of exotic species. It's also a place where students can get some opportunities to help educate the public about care of animals and environmental protection. I would say that you should definitely apply if you want to get experience with exotic species and you're willing to do a bit of work, because you'll get a lot out of this internship.
All right, and then so the last part of the presentation, I just have some fun photos and videos of our animals here. So a lot of these highlight enrichment that we give the animals. So you've already heard a few times, enrichment is anything we can give them to stimulate their senses, enhance their lives here. We also do things like painting with our, you can see our ball python there. Sometimes the enrichment is more fun for the zookeepers. As you can see in that right photo, we had a little bit of fun with the marmoset food that day. But we try and engage natural behaviors that you might see in the wild. So the balls that you see there, the tennis balls and the wiffle balls, encourage primates to forage or pick through things for their food. You can see our sugar glider has a lot of things to climb on, and that branch has holes drilled in so we can give them some nectar and sap that they might get in the wild. And then just lots of variety of things. So each animal gets different types of enrichment. But fun stuff. So I'll just run through some videos of animals here. So this, you saw a little clip of this earlier in the chimps, but we gave them a mirror. And so chimps are one of the few animals that can actually recognize themselves. So here you see our adult female Tabitha, who's on the right, check herself out. It's pretty funny.
Can I swim? There's too many muscles.
Everybody else is done with it. All right, so you won't see that mirror every time you come here. So if, enrichment works like toys for kids. If they have it for a while, they get bored with it. So enrichment, we have to constantly switch out all the time to keep the animals from not being, from losing interest in those items. This is our coatis getting some extra enrichment on an enrichment day event we had here at the zoo last year. And then recently, this was just from this past week, we gave someone very graciously bought a bubble shooter off of our Amazon wish list. So we got to give that to some of the primates. So this is Ralphie, one of our gibbons, enjoying that. So gibbons wouldn't necessarily be seeing bubbles in the wild, but things like flying insects or things flying through the air, and it's just a fun way to get their brains thinking about something different and engage them in a different way.
People get a kick out of it.
All right, and then this video is a little bit longer, but it shows both our lions and tigers getting some meat. So this is something we did special for an event that we had. Normally they get fed inside their night house so that they're not associating food or feeding time with their outdoor enclosures. So this is a little different, but it gave us a better view of what it looks like when they eat.
I'm here to feed the cats, the lions and the tigers. We're going to do it right now.
So there's the pile of meat on the rock. 30 pounds at a time they eat. 30 pounds of raw meat every time. Every 3 days.
All right. This is a short video clip. So when we put in that new glass window, we were able to expand the hyena exhibit a little bit, so we made room for a pool for them. So this is our hyena checking out that pool for the first time. And if you pay attention, there's a little frog on the left-hand side that spooks her a little bit. Right there, just hopped in front of her. We haven't actually seen them use the pool yet. I'm waiting to see what today they might have used it. It was pretty hot out today, but so far no reports of them. They're still getting used to it being there. Right. This is just a short clip of one of our wallaby babies, so or joeys. So just to show being an animal mom can be just as tough as being a human mom. You get beat up a lot. And this is Pongo. He's a red-legged Siriema, so one of the birds that we have here. What's really cool about this species is that the males participate in nest making along with the females. So there he is perfecting his nest. That was just a really short one. This next one is of our other gibbons. It's a little quiet, but you can hear them making what we call food whimpers. So kind of these really cute little sounds to say that they found food and are excited about it. And mom, that just swung down, does have a very new baby, less than a month old on her belly. So we have lots of new exciting babies and animals around here all the time as well, so that always makes our job a little bit more fun. This is a short video clip of our rhinos. We have 2 white rhinos. We do actually do rhino encounters here where you get to meet them up close and personal and can interact with them through the safety of some concrete bars. So this I got at the end of one of our encounters. They laid down for a little snooze, so you can hear her snoring. All right, so I just have 2 more clips here. This one's a little bit longer one. You'll hear me talking. This was another video we recorded for one of our virtual sessions. This is Pickles, our Cape or African crested porcupine that Sarah mentioned in her video earlier. And so I'll let the video do its thing and explain to you why we had him out.
So we're here with Pickles, our Cape porcupine, and Lauren, our head education coordinator. And you can see that Pickles is extremely used to people, and that's because he is one of our education ambassador animals. So we have quite a range of ambassador animals here that we work with using positive reinforcement training to be able to offer educational experiences for our visitors and guests in the larger community. So Pickles here was the runt of his litter. That means he was the smallest when he was born and wasn't really being taken care of by mom. So zookeepers stepped in and decided to hand raise him so that we could ensure he had the best life possible. And in doing so, he became very used to being around people. So you can see Lauren is holding out her hand and saying target, and that's part of his training, so it allows him to focus on her hand as a place to go to or target to. And if he hits her hand just like that, he gets a nice sweet potato reward. So that's something called positive reinforcement training. We ask Pickles to do something, he does something we like, and he gets rewarded. So positive behavior is reinforced, and it creates a very trusting relationship between Pickles and Lauren. So she wants to show off. He also can get up and move around a little bit, also using that target cue to walk around and be able to move around freely to show off how porcupines move. So as he's walking, you can see that his quills are a little bit raised, and that's because he is still getting used to his surroundings, and those are his defense. So he's going to stick fairly close to Lauren, or to me, people that he knows, but he will return to Lauren's hand to target when she calls him. Now those quills that he has are actually just modified hairs. So a lot of people think that porcupines can shoot their quills. That's actually a myth. Just like we can't shoot our hair off of our head, Pickles here can't shoot his quills. But what he can do is use those quills to protect himself. If he's feeling in danger, he will spread those quills out very wide, run away and stop short so that whatever was following him will hit him from behind and get poked with those sharp quills, giving him a chance to escape. So we do have to be careful working with him that we don't accidentally end up on the back end of those sharp quills. But like I mentioned earlier, we work very closely with all of our ambassador animals to make sure we have really good, trusting, cooperative relationships with them.
All right, sadly, this next clip will be our last one. It's of our little cotton top tamarin. So if you guys want to start thinking of any questions you might have when this is done, it's about a 40-second clip. We can get to some questions. All right, so thank you guys so much for listening. Hopefully you learned a few things about our animals, learned a little bit about the zoo. So definitely can stick around for a few minutes for any questions you guys might have.
All right, we have one question from Jody.
Okay.
Are all of the indoor areas where animals stay in the winter customized for each species' ideal habitat?
Good question. So the indoor areas are not as customized as the outdoor enclosures, just because we're a little bit more limited on space, but they are definitely all outfitted for the animal's particular needs. So for example, all of our monkeys and primates that move inside continue to have lots of climbing structures and things to climb on and toys to play with. Whereas our rhino barn, their indoor area does not have anything to climb on. Since they don't do that, it's a lot of big open space since they're big animals, and it has space for them to lie down in, and a big water trough and another trough for their hay. So each area is a little bit different. It's not as pretty looking as it is as their outdoor enclosures because no one has to see that but us. But that's a good question.
We have another one from Claudia Kale. How are the trainers able to establish relationships with the animals that it's physically more difficult to be near?
Good question. So so some of our animals, as you can imagine, like our tigers and lions, the zookeepers don't go in with them for safety reasons, but we can still establish relationships and trust with those animals through protective barriers. So through fencing or through bars, we can still get them to associate us and the keepers with things that they like, usually feeding time, and we can work with them with different behaviors. So positive reinforcement is the main way we train our animals, but it's not the only way. And that way really works because we associate a behavior that they're doing with something they like. So whether that's a food reinforcement or sometimes just attention or touching is the reinforcement, that animal learns that that they, if they do that behavior, they get a reward. But we zookeepers are have to become kind of specialists in animal behavior and reading those cues that all the keepers talked about. So we are definitely very aware of if an animal is not acting normally, which might be a sign that they're uncomfortable or ill and needs to be checked out. We don't push a training session if they feel like they are not wanting to cooperate that day. We can read their behavioral cues and not do that. But that's a really good question, but we are able to develop relationships even with animals that we don't go in directly with or don't hold or carry directly. We can still form those bonds.
All right, and then I have another question while we wait and see if anyone else has more. Have you added any new animals to the zoo aside from the little ones that have been born there?
So because the zoo has been around for over 50 years, it's definitely gone through changes. At one point, back in the day, there were elephants here. We determined, we haven't had elephants here in at least 4 years now. We determined that we just didn't have the adequate space for them to properly care for them. There were bears here at one point, way before I started working here. And then even just within the last year or so, this past season, we got 2 young cheetah cubs in from another zoological facility. So they are separated right now from our adults that we already had. They can see and smell each other through a barrier, but they're not in together. And our goal and the reason why we brought them here is that when they do get old enough, they'll be part of a breeding program. So cheetahs are, very endangered in the wild. We have pretty healthy populations in captivity. Our cheetahs won't be eligible to be like re-released in the wild, but it will help maintain the population of cheetahs we have across zoological facilities here under human care so that we can continue to learn about them and educate people about them. So that's usually when we get new animals in, is for some purpose like that, besides the ones that are born here and are allowed to naturally breed. Before them, I think last year we got a pair of servals here. But beyond that, it's getting new animals in always requires that we have the adequate space and we can take care of them so we have the proper knowledge of our team. So we don't get new animals that often unless we know that we can properly take care of them first. That's a really good question.
Oh, thanks. And Diane asks, what's the most interesting animal that has been at Southwick Zoo?
Oh, that's such a tough question. That's right up there with what's, we always get asked what's our favorite animal, and I have a different answer every time. They're all, I know this is kind of a cop-out, but I think they're all interesting in their own way. The bigger animals like our giraffes and rhinos and chimpanzees and tigers and lions are definitely public favorites because I think they're so big and they're so different from the animals we see in our backyards. But honestly, on that note, we have native wildlife chipmunks running all around the zoo, and sometimes the kids are just as interested in the chipmunks that are not technically zoo animals. I'm really biased towards all of our lemurs and monkeys and apes, being a primate person, but I think they're all interesting in their own way. Honestly, even our insects and invertebrates, our tarantulas and millipedes and things that usually kind of creep people out, they are fascinating in their own way, and that's part of our job as educators, to educate people as to why they're fascinating and why they have important roles in the ecosystem, as whether it's a pollinator or a decomposer, or we want to inspire people of all ages to love animals of all kinds.
Oh, thanks so much. I love that answer. We don't have any more questions from the chat.
Great.
I believe that's it. Thank you so much for, metaphorically speaking, coming out here today and speaking to all of us. This was a great talk.
Thank you so much. It was my pleasure. Thanks for listening, and hopefully, we are open now with some limitations and safety restrictions in place. So, if you feel comfortable coming out now, hopefully we'll see you. If not, hopefully we'll see you soon, later in the year, as things hopefully continue to get better.